Tony, it's good to see you. It's good to see all your faces. I hope that whatever the week has presented itself with, whether it's knocked you upside the head, whether it's been kind, whether it's just thrown you in the middle of a whirlwind, I hope this morning that you'll take time to just rest in his presence. Let him knock off the dust and the stress of the week, because church should be a place that you should come and not only get encouraged and lifted up, but you should get some tools in your belt to go out there and build the life that God has for each and every one of you. In the Bible, so often talks about blessings. And I'm really glad that it doesn't say that God is a God of wrath, but he says that God is a God of blessings. Not that he won't paddle your behind when you need it, because he is a good and loving father, and a good and loving father will discipline their children. But a good and loving father, so often I've heard parents say, I want to provide for my children, maybe in a way that they didn't have growing up. When you are a parent, you not only want to love and direct your children, but you want to be a blessing into their life. And God is the same way. I had read a scripture early on where it talked about a blessing, and it talked about a blessing so big that you couldn't contain it. They said it was pressed down and it was shaken together and it was running over. And I thought, wow, to be able to have a blessing that you just can't contain yourself. And we're going to hear about a gentleman that happened to, and he wasn't necessarily looking for it, but this blessing was so amazing, so unbelievable to him that he didn't know how to process it. In fact, his blessing was so huge that he had to call his buddies and say, I need your help with this because it's taking me down. It's too much. I can't handle all of it. But it's strange what he did with that. You know, if I was to get a blessing like that, like let's say maybe it was a financial windfall that came in, I might pick up the phone and say, hey, we are going out to dinner, bring all your friends, it's on me. Or I would get that one thing that I had been hoping for, or maybe that one gift that I had been wanting to give somebody. We look at blessings and we say, wow, what can I do with this? But a lot of times God gives you a blessing so that you ask God, what will you have me do with this? And so the gentleman that we're going to learn about today he was a crusty guy. He was muscular. He was loudmouthed. He had a quick temper. And he really didn't know his manners that well. He didn't have a lot of social etiquette. He was the wild one in the bunch, and if you had somebody that was picking on you, he's probably the one that you would go to because he was known as being quick-tempered and quick-fisted. He would not run away from a fight. Lots of times he would start a fight. And strangely enough, this is one who Jesus chose to bless with a blessing that couldn't be contained. He never even really hoped for such a blessing from God's favor. He was the kind of person that if it was going to be done, he was going to do it himself. Growing up in the synagogue, he was not one of the rabbi's pets by any means. If anybody was causing problems, it probably would be him. He wasn't holy like a lot of his classmates were. When it came time for them to choose their careers, a lot of them growing up in the synagogue would hope, I hope the rabbi picks me. Then I can be part of this elite group. And I'll feel really good about myself. I've earned this holiness reputation, and the rabbis have picked me. And this guy, he never, if that was a dream, it was squashed early on because he would see their holiness and he would see his dirtiness. And in those times, if you didn't get picked to follow the rabbi, then you did what your parents did, what your father did. That's just who you were. If your father was a carpenter, then unless there was some strange change of events, you were going to be a carpenter. If your father was a shepherd, you didn't look any further because you were going to be a shepherd. And this guy, he grew up on the water. He grew up fishing with his daddy. As early as he can remember, his memories were being on the boat with his dad. And that was actually a pretty cool place to be. He wasn't really good with words, so the great thing about fishing is you really didn't have to hold a conversation. You just sat with somebody. And his brother was the same. He grew up in the family business of fishing. That's what they knew. He knew it inside and out. He wasn't an expert at a lot of things, but he was an expert at the fishing industry. He could tell you where to fish, when to fish, what kind of bait to use, what kind of net to use, where to throw out your net, where to place your boat. He knew all the tips. He knew all the tricks. And in that area, he walked with confidence. He didn't walk in confidence in a lot of areas. He wasn't too smart. He was kind of handsome, but he wouldn't win any contest. But fishing, he had some stories for you. Some true, some a little embellished, as all fishermen know. And since you didn't really have a camera there, you could embellish a little bit. You could say, man, this one haul that we got in, whew, I thought it was going to take the boat down. So many fish. And that was his life. And that's really all he dreamed of, was becoming a successful fisherman. And as luck would have it, two of his best buddies, they were fishermen too. And the dads were friends. And so one night, sitting around bringing in their haul for the day, they decided, why don't we just pool our resources and let's make this big. Let's be a fishing enterprise. And that's what his goals were. He wanted to have nice things because at home he had a wife. And it sounds strange, but the mother-in-law lived with him, but he really liked her. And he wanted to do something special for his wife. He wanted to be somebody. And any time that the fishing day was a little less than what he had hoped, his wife kind of knew it because of the body language walking up to the walk. She knew already it hadn't been a good day. I better get his meal ready now. He's not going to be happy. And then she could tell when it was a good day. There was a lightness in his step. And one day it so happened that him and his buddies had went out there and they had fished. And he doesn't know what went wrong. He was at the right place at the right time, had the right nets, had the right bait. This area was known for having a lot of fish, and man, it didn't matter. Didn't matter how many times he threw the net out, there was nothing. And he wasn't too happy. He was tired. He was sweaty. He was hungry. And just about as he was ready to finish up so he could go home, get something to eat, and just lay down, he saw a crowd coming. And he saw a big crowd coming. And he thought, what is going on? And when he looked up, he realized, I know him. Here comes Jesus, and oh my gosh, there is a crowd. He had seen Jesus in the synagogue. In fact, he kind of had a connection with Jesus because just prior to this, his mother-in-law had gotten really sick. And he saw Jesus heal all these people in the synagogue. And then the strangest thing, he came to Peter's house. And he healed his mother-in-law. And he didn't just make her a little bit better. He made her so much better that when she was healed, she got up and started fixing the food the way that only she can do it. But here he comes again. And there's a crowd. And he knows he's nowhere near finished with this net because he didn't want to talk to even his buddies, much less this crowd. And then now this Jesus who is holy, he's going to have to watch his language, because the words that he's thinking right now are not holy. But maybe he can finish in time. Maybe he can just slip out. Maybe he even contemplated leaving the net and coming back for it later. But isn't that like Jesus when we have our plans and have it all figured out one way? He's like, oh, wait a minute. We're going to do something a little bit different. He tells Peter, I want you to get into your boat. I'm going to get in the boat with you. And I want you to push out a little ways because, to be real honest, Jesus was feeling a tad claustrophobic. Because, see, word had spread that this man can heal you. And if you just touch him, oh, can you imagine? I like my personal bubble, my space. And if somebody gets a little too close, even if I really like you, you're going to find me going backwards a little bit because you're in my bubble. But he had a multitude that was pushing and shoving, just trying to touch him. So Jesus said to Peter, I need you to get into your boat, push out a little ways because these people, they're pressing in on me. Now, Jesus was smart. That wasn't just a getaway, but water really amplifies your voice. The Bible doesn't tell us what Peter thought, and Peter probably didn't want it written down, but Peter probably wasn't too happy about it. But nevertheless, you have a multitude of people looking at you. He owes him something. I mean, he healed his mother-in-law. He gets to go home to a wife that doesn't have a broken heart. So yeah, he owes him at least this. So they get into the boat, and he pushes out a little ways, and Jesus begins to talk. I don't know how long Jesus talked, but I do know that several times in the Bible it said that the people were starting to get hungry. So I don't think it was a short sermon because he had a short amount of time, but a lot of information to get out. And he was teaching and talking. This was his area of expertise. Peter wasn't that eloquent with his words. He could get his point across, but it didn't sound anything like Jesus. And for a split second, he thought, well, this is going to be boring. This is going to take a long time. But he found himself enthralled and hanging on to every single word that was said. Why? Because it was so colorful. He weaved in stories and parables. He grew up with the rabbis, and the rabbis would try to impress you by talking about how much they knew, and they would lose you because you didn't have a clue. And the words that they would use, he didn't even know what half of those words meant. But this guy, man, he could relate to him. It was like all of a sudden, for the first time, he was seeing things differently. And so really, he enjoyed himself. And when it was over, he expected Jesus to get out of the boat and walk away. And the multitude go somewhere else. But instead, he turns to Peter and he says, did you catch anything? Oh, I'm humiliated again. Hopefully not too many people hear it because I'm the successful fisherman, and I have to say, no, I didn't. And Jesus, rather than patting him on the shoulder and say, well, maybe tomorrow, he tells him something so strange. He tells him to go out into the deep and put down his net. Now, what Jesus does, and what we do when we teach the Bible, is any time that a message has been taught, usually right after it, you have a chance to apply that message to your life. Because Jesus knows that head knowledge, that's good. But if you don't do anything with it, your life's not going to change. See, I can quote scriptures to you all day long, and I can read you a dry Bible story and not put any kind of application into it to your life, and I can give you all kinds of information. But unless you know how to apply it to your life, I've done nothing but take up some time. I haven't helped you. But Jesus, every time that he would teach, then you would find yourself in a situation that you could apply that knowledge. I've known several Christians in my life that made me feel kind of bad in a way that they were always at the Bible study, always at a different conference, always listening to this preacher on TV and listening to this Christian song, and they've read this Christian book, and they've got this Christian CDs, and every Christian outing that there was, they were at them. But the thing that I noticed is they weren't really happy. It's like they were so hungry they couldn't get enough, but actually the reason they were still hungry is because they weren't making any room. They weren't doing anything with the information that was being told to them. You can read self-help books all day long, and you can be able to tell everybody in your circle, this is what you need to do, because I've read all these books. But unless you have a chance to apply that knowledge, it doesn't change your life. So Peter found himself in this situation. He had heard all kinds of stuff, and then now he's faced with a predicament. He could have told him no. But what he did say is he said, we have fished all night. I'm tired. But nevertheless, if you say so, Master, that's what I'll do. Now, Peter was not known for being humble, so I don't think it was said with humility. I think it was like, sure, I'll do it. I'm the expert here. You don't know, but you know what? Just to get you to shut up so that I can smile at you and see, I told you. Nevertheless, I'm going to do what you say. So he does. He gets out there, his buddies go with him, and he throws out the net. Now, what we have to do, it's not good just to read a Bible story, hear about a Bible character. We want to try to put ourselves there and say, what can I learn from this? Because it's great to hear a good story, but what can you get from it? That's what's going to make the difference in your life. Because if you know anything about Peter, his life drastically changed, and he made one of the hugest difference in people's lives. But he was an expert in this area. What Jesus was telling him to do did not make sense whatsoever. That would be like if you were hungry and you were starved and you knew where the kitchen was, that would be like somebody telling you to go outside and sit behind a rock. You'd be like, excuse me? That's never going to work. That makes no sense whatsoever. So we have to be careful in our lives when Jesus asks us to do something that makes no common sense to us whatsoever, that we don't discount it. We should be like Peter, saying, all right, makes no sense to me. What do I got to lose? I'm going to try it. So Peter does. They go out there and they throw the net out. And not only does the net begin to shake and the boat begins to shake, all of a sudden Peter, who is muscular, who has handled this net full of fish time and time again, his muscles start to give out. This is a haul like he has never imagined, and he can't contain himself, and he is hollering for his friends, and he's like, I need some help. But they're like, buddy, we can't help you that much because our nets are doing the same thing. This blessing is so big, it's going to take us down and kill us. How'd he die? Well, he was blessed to death. I mean, because the boat's starting to go under. Now, our human side might start calculating really fast, even if we're not good at math. Man, I can get my wife anything that she wants now. We can open up, we can spread, we can go further. If I get $1 for a fish, oh my gosh, I can't even count how much this is going to be. We are going to be set for life. But Peter does something completely different. With a blessing that he had hoped for and dreamed for, now he didn't just see the blessing, he saw the blessor. He took his eyes off of what would set him up for the rest of his life. He would have no worries. His dad, who was older in years now, wouldn't have to struggle so much. But he didn't see that. He saw the blessor. We have to be very careful in our life, whatever that blessing may be, that we don't focus so much on the blessing that we forget the blessor. Because Jesus will use blessings in our life to sometimes get us to a different place. All of a sudden now, Peter sees things completely different. Peter, who was an expert in his field, realized he knew nothing because something supernatural had happened here. And even all of the commotion and everybody hollering and pulling in the nets and the boat rocking back and forth, it all seemed to fade completely away as he got this revelation of Jesus knows more about just healing. Because he didn't want to admit it, but a part of him, just in the back of his mind, thought, well, maybe they were going to get better anyway. Maybe he just came along at the right time. But there was no denying this miracle because, see, this was his area of expertise. He had just been there all night long. There was nothing. And from nothing came an abundance that he couldn't even contain. There's always a meaning behind your blessing. And Peter, for the first time, realized that he was in the presence of not just a human with a gift, but somebody superhuman, if you will. And Peter falls to his knees in the boat, rocking back and forth, the fish still flopping. It's just Peter and Jesus as far as he's concerned, and he becomes terrified. He becomes terrified because next to nothing but holiness, he sees nothing but his filthy life, his filthy mouth, his filthy thoughts, his filthy ways, and he can't stand the difference that he feels. And in the culture that he grew up in, if somebody was sick or had a disability, if you were to touch them, that would be transferred to you. He couldn't stand it. He had failed at many things in his life. But to maybe be the one that was known that, yeah, it was that dirty Peter that touched Jesus, and then Jesus' ministry just went away. Because the enemy says, you're too dirty. You can't be next to holiness. And he falls to his knees and he tells him to depart from him. He's like, leave me be, I'm a sinner. Leave me. But instead of Jesus, poof, disappearing, as he raises his head, Jesus is still there. And Peter, for a split second, gets brave enough to make eye contact. And instead of seeing condemnation, guilt, that's what he deserves, because he's seen it many times from people in his life, how they've looked at him after he's messed up or maybe saw the real him. He sees nothing but love and compassion. And strangely enough, acceptance. He doesn't know how to process this. Luckily, the wind is blowing enough that when he wipes his eyes, he can blame it on the salty air. But really, it's tears of humbleness because he was amazed. All of a sudden, the fish, the blessings, they didn't really matter because he knew that this was much bigger than the blessing. What just happened to him tells him so much about the blesser. He thought he was an expert, but Jesus knows so much more. And in the presence of him, all I see is my sin. See, Jesus wants to bless us, but he wants to bless us so he can amaze us. And there's a much deeper reason. Peter bowed down and he was amazed. When we get a blessing, we need to take after Peter, humble and bow our head, and realize that we're just a bag of dirt that happens to love him. And it's only because his goodness and his grace. We really don't accomplish anything on our own. You might say, well, no, I'm the one that made that phone call. Yeah, but God gave you the breath to speak the words. So you got to keep your blessings in focus. And I'm not just talking about material blessings. I'm talking about your health. How often do we just take our health for granted? Our sound mind, your personality, the family that he gives you. You are blessed in so many areas, but we have to be careful to keep our eye not on the blessing, but the blessor. And that's what Peter does. He says this right here. I don't even have words for this. Jesus wants to bless you so that you'll look at him differently. See, when he first came and got into Peter's boat, Peter was looking at him as, he's a pretty smart guy. That's a pretty good story. He's a good speaker. He's pretty compassionate. That's how he saw him. But because of the blessing that came, he saw him in a whole different perspective. He saw it as not only is he an expert in this area, he's an expert where I thought that I was all it. He's changed nature. You're not supposed to fish in the heat of the day. The fish won't come up to the nets. Any fisherman knows this. That's common knowledge. Yet in the heat of the day, against all odds, this is the biggest catch he had ever had. We have to be careful when we get a blessing that we don't say, all right, Jesus, I want you to bless this area in my life. This is what we're doing with this. And we do want his blessing. But the first thing when you get a blessing is you say, what do I do with this? Because if it wasn't written in the Bible, wouldn't you think I was lying if I said biggest fish catch of his life was going to set him up for life? His dad could retire, but Jesus told him to leave it all. You would think, oh, whoa, wait, what? Can't you just take some of it with you? Cash in to make sure you have enough for your travels? No. He wanted him to leave it all because there was something much bigger in the picture. And so when they come back, after Jesus doesn't jump ship, it says in Luke chapter 5 and verse 11, that so when they brought their boats to land, they forsake all and followed him. In other words, they left everything. Wow. What would that moment have been like for it not even to be a second thought? Because see, what seems to be so big in your life when Jesus comes, wraps his arms around you, you'll say, what was I even worried about that for? Because his presence is so overwhelming. It says that they left everything because Jesus said, now I will make you fishers of men. The reason that I blessed you is so that you'll follow me. In other words, he's saying, I can take care of any situation that comes up in your life. You just saw it, front row seat. I blessed you so that you would follow me and so that you would view me differently because we're going somewhere else. He used to be a fisherman and now he's going to fish for men. He tells Peter, you're going to do something greater. And the reason that he blesses us is so that we can get on with his program, not him come along and follow our agenda. There's nothing wrong with seeking a blessing. We just have to be sure that we aren't asking him to follow us, that we're following him, because he may have something else in mind. We have our dreams and our own agendas, but he may be after something a lot bigger in your life. And perhaps he's going to bless you just so he can get your attention. You never want your blessing to be such a focus that you forget the blessor. In other words, he was telling Peter, what I showed you with the fish, that's just to let you know that I can do it all and that I know how to get things done. They left it all. But in comparison, they received so much more. Pray for your blessings, but remember that it's about much more than just the blessing. And the thing is when you bless others with your blessing, God will make sure that your cup doesn't run dry. I would have liked to have been there to see the conversation that took place between him and his wife. And apparently it went just fine because it says often they would come back to Peter's house. See, because when she saw Peter after that encounter, his body language was completely different, something that she had never seen before. There was a lightness in his step that hadn't been there before. And that smile, the reason that she fell in love with him was that smile when he would throw back his head and laugh and her heart would skip a beat. Man, she hadn't seen that smile in quite a while. His brow was always kind of furrowed because he was worried about, is there going to be enough fish for the next day? But he didn't have that stress anymore because he thought Jesus will take care. Jesus will take care. And as he bounds into the room with his presence bigger than life, he's like a little boy set free inside because for once he feels okay about himself. Because when Jesus looked at him, Jesus could see straight into his soul. It was like he could read every thought. And he didn't turn away from him. He accepted him. So yeah, Peter wanted this blessing, this fishing industry to thrive. Oh, but in comparison, what he got changed not only his life, but he developed an early church. And one of the first times that he got up to speak, 3,000 people came to Christ. I don't know how many fish were in the nets when they pulled them up, but wouldn't that be cool if it was one fish per soul? I don't know. But that was just one meeting, and Peter didn't stop with just one meeting. So what I want to tell you today is, number one, you're okay and you're more than okay. God sees through your soul. He sees your thoughts. He hears your words. He sees your actions. But he's not getting out of the boat. He's staying right there. And he's saying, if you let me, I can take care of areas in your life so that you can help others in different areas of their life. Peter was a fisherman. I like to fish okay. Basically, I like the water and the sunshine part of it a lot better. I do like to eat it. I just don't like the warm part. Don't like that part at all. But whether you like to fish in the natural or not, whether you have any expertise in that or not, God's calling you and I to be a fisher of men. That fishing expedition I want to go on. So I just want you to know that God wants you to be blessed. And there's nothing wrong with praying for those blessings. But don't keep your eye on the blessing. Keep your eye on the blessor. God bless you this morning.